Welcome to episode 5 of Soul Talk. Today we're talking about time, which is a really delicious conversation. And I want to start by talking about the fact that time has been characterized as our most precious resource, like above money, right? Time is our most precious resource. And it's like, I feel like we use this in a way to kind of give us a reason to set boundaries and say, oh, well, I value my time. I value my space and time, right? And so since I value my time, I can't give this to you. I can't give that to you or whatever. I just feel like this talking about time as our most precious resource attaches us to it like in this gripping way. It puts us in this scarcity mindset of like, well, I have to hoard my time or I have to make sure that I use it in a certain way because it is so precious to me. It almost becomes this entitled thing. And I know that one of the things that Nino said before we started recording was that we tether ourselves to time. So can you talk about that a little bit, Nino? Because I think that's the crux of this.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was tuning into time and the essence of it, I tuned into the fact that we measure our successes and our failures by time. And in doing so, we're tethering ourselves to time and whether or not we are valid and validated in where we are in life, where we are in our careers and our relationships. And it really is, and I think we talked about this right before our call, it's where we start tuning into lack and comparison even with other people of where they are at in life. And that's just not something that is, one, our business, and two, it makes us feel strapped by time when time was meant to be fluid and it can provide structure to us, but the structure is not meant to contain us in this lack and in this discomfort.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that comparison piece. I'm so glad you brought that in because that's exactly it. It's this structured timeline that we witness that we think we're supposed to be on. And a lot of that is societal, right? Conditioning that has been put in place. But I think that when we really look at ourselves as these sovereign beings, these sovereign souls who are here for completely our own journey, yes, we're going to be in exchange and interaction with other people, but we look so much to those outside of us. We look so much to what is outside of us and what has already been done. And like you said, it straps us. It holds us back from seeing all that we can accomplish, all that is available that may have never been charted on this planet before. And if that takes our whole lifetimes to do it, it takes our whole lifetimes to do it. It's like Jesus's grandmother said, I know without a doubt that I am planting seeds in this lifetime that are not going to grow into full fruition while I am alive. And that's the ultimate piece of faith right there. This is ultimate devotion to faith is being able to say, like, I know that my being is of utmost value that is not tethered to any kind of measurement, whether we're talking about time, money, accomplishment, success, like you said, in any area. And so I like this concept of we're not meant to be contained. Like if you find yourself in any of those narratives of I'm not there yet, or once I get there, then, right? You're not in the present moment. You're not in appreciation of what you are and what you have. And therefore, you haven't tasted the depth and the richness of the essence that is available to you now, right? So, do either of you have a thought on that?
I do. I think it's also restrictive in that we wait for something, or like we're waiting for, like, yes, be present, but also you can make your present space whatever you desire it to be. You don't have to wait for anything. We hinge a lot on, if something happens, then I will do this, or if I receive some specific clarity in one area, then I can move forward in this. And it's like, no, like that's when you trust your intuition. That's when you trust energy in the present to inform how you want your present to evolve, how you want to operate within it. And I think that time can be just as restrictive as thought. I think that time is born in thought. It wouldn't exist if we didn't have to make sense of things, if we didn't have to chart a path of structure, like we were talking about, like morning, noon, night, like just from the simplest standpoint. Like if we didn't have to make sense of what we do in the present moment throughout the day, would it exist? And then in that we're very constricted.
Laura, you look like you're ready. Do you want to go first?
I love that concept of time can be is just as restrictive as thought, because it's that perception, right? It's that perception of time. And I think that what immediately came forward for me as Jenna was talking about that was the concept of dissociation. Being a therapist, I'm thinking about dissociation. I'm thinking about dementia patients. I'm thinking about Alzheimer's patients, people who lose this sense of time. Um, and why? Because they're in a different perceptual state. So it's fascinating to me because it's like many of those people are entirely in the now, entirely in the present moment. A lot of them don't remember a thing from the past, and they are just in the present moment. And what are they focused on in that moment? Those patients, they're focused on sensation. They're focused on sensation. And it's like, and that sensation is heightened for them in present moment. So it's like if you go up to, I remember when I would visit Alzheimer's patients or dementia patients, and they would flip out if the noise was a little too loud, or they would flip out if they could sense something. Their senses were so refined and in tune that they were at this point of reactivity because their senses were so heightened. And so it's just interesting to me because it's like when we allow ourselves to dissolve this structured container of time and this perception of it, the sensory experience, which is why we are here in human bodies, by the way, right? Why would we have sensation, which also brings us emotion? Let's be clear, right? That actual experience that we are meant to have here in human bodies is heightened. So, Nina, what comes up for you? Because I can see you thinking.
Yeah. Um, I wrote earlier how depending on where we live in society or in the societal structure, our sense of time is different. Children experience time differently than we do as adults who are working in a 9 to 5 or whatever, construct you're in. And even the 9 to 5ers are experiencing time differently than, let's say, people who are living off the land and working with the land in agricultural areas. They don't abide by time in the same way, which tells me that time is fluid. And it is just like Jenna was saying, it's like the mind. But I wrote earlier, we are the timekeepers, as in our mind is what keeps time. Our mind and our perception is what informs how we see and perceive time. And even when we look into when we're noting time, we're basing it on what we can see with our 3D eyes and not what's actually happening, right? And we want to say, if I can't see it happening, it's not done. If I can't see it happening, I must be doing something wrong. If I can't see it. But sight is not the best sense for time because there's so much that's happening under the surface. Even when we're looking at seeds to sprout, we can plant seeds early, spring, late winter, and it takes time for us to finally see it sprout. And we think, oh, I don't know if that took. I don't know if that's going to grow. And that not knowing is where we start feeling that discomfort, the sensation. I think we can feel what's growing, and because we can't see what we're feeling, our mind starts to try to make sense of it, and we can't. And that's where we start going into, "It's not working," "I'm not doing this right." We start to put stories on top of it, and we lose sight of where we are at in time. We lose sight of the present. And I think that's the only measure of time that matters. We can look at the past, but every time we look at the past, we're reliving it. So really, the past becomes the present. So does the past really exist in our sensation, in our lived sensation? At that point, the past is now. And even when we look in the future, you know, if we daydream about future happenings or if we start looking into what could go wrong, we start to feel the sensation of that now. So in that way, we are the vessel of time.
I really love that because it also shows us how much yes, the now is the only moment, because the sensations that we have in the now are a an accumulation of everything that's occurred in the past as well, right? And like you said, you can bring the sensation of the future into your body now. So it's really about present sensation and this concept of being able to measure or take note of time through sensation is brilliant. And I feel that so much because there will be days where I feel like I have no time at all. That it goes by so fast and I'm like, where did this day go? Where did this day go? Right? And then I have days where I'm like, I feel like I have so much space and it's not necessarily aligned with how much I have to do on my calendar. Right? Some days, yeah, there'll be so much on my calendar, but it can still feel like that day lasted forever. Right? And so for me, when I tune into that, it's how present was I with sensation during that day? Because I can have a day I have nothing on my calendar and it goes by so fast. And I'm just like, where did that go? Right? And a lot of the times, what I'll find is that's because I was lost in the mind or because I was connected to a narrative. And so I can be doing a million things and actually feel like I have more time that day because I'm more present with the now of what I'm experiencing in the now with each of those things that I'm doing. And so I think sometimes when people say, create more space, right? You create more space and more space arrives. Yes, I agree with this. I do this, I practice this. But I can also see why some people pack their schedules because maybe they have difficulty sitting with themselves in sensation, in space, in present space with themselves. And it's easier for them to feel like they have more fulfillment of time in their lives because they're present in these moments with all these things they've put on their calendar. So they can feel more fulfillment from that. And we can argue that fulfillment has less depth, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe it actually allows them to access sensational parts of themselves that they don't know how to do when they sit in space. The key is tuning into sensation. So, how is this feeling for you guys?
It's just bringing me back to structured thought and why time is created is because we needed and desired structure. in a sense, because we couldn't be in space, or people just didn't want to be in that present space and feel that sensation. It feels to me like a lot of the time when we structure, it's funny when we say a lot of the time, a lot of the time when we structure time, it's very escapism. That's what it feels like to me in a lot of ways, to not be present. Um, but there's something I also wanted to touch on with what Nina was saying about like feeling into the past, because it feels to me like that's how we can slip so easily into cycles, right? Because if we feel the past, quote unquote past, and bring it into the future, into now, into where we are now, we will relive that moment in the present, yes. And then we're back in cycle. And we don't, escape those, you could say even past life things, ancestral things, those felt sense moments that come up in our fields that we then lean into and create narrative on in the present moment that just continue to be cyclical, and we don't step out of them because of the concept of time. I don't know.
Sorry, I had a really loud truck passing over here. So I took a moment. While you were talking, Laura, I was starting to think about Saint Teresa and how she used to say all the time, the busier that I am, the more I need to sit in prayer with God, with Source. And it's this, for her, prayer was meditation. It was connection with Source, connection with self. So however that looks like for each of us will be different. Some of us need a 5-minute walk. Some of us need a 30-minute meditation. Others may need a shower, just letting it all fall off with water, right? So, how we structure our time throughout the day can inform how we access those pockets of presence. And the more often we access those pockets of presence, I think the more fulfilling life is. Whether we need to sit still with sensation or we need to move through that sensation is entirely unique, and it's okay. We're not saying sit for 30 minutes in meditation and feel sensation for 30 minutes if that's just not how your body works, right? Um, so just clarifying that. And then to what Jenna was saying, yes, we can go back into those pockets of the past and use them as a crutch for the present. And that is the worst thing that we can do. And I think that's why a lot of the time I tend to move away from past life experiences, because it can make alive what was never in my field other than that moment of tapping into that frequency. And now I have something in my mind, a narrative in my mind that I clutch onto and grip as to explain why I can't do something or why something is hard for me. Forget that. No, I can inform you and say, oh, that's why that felt uncomfortable. And now that I know why it felt uncomfortable, okay, thank you. Thank you for revealing that to me. You can go now.
Don't even get me started on past life stuff, Nino. I could talk about that all damn day because that makes me insane. I really don't. When people sign up for Akashic Record sessions with me and say, I want to know where this past life root is, right? Listen, if there's one that's really present right at the gate, I'm going to feel it. I'm going to know, and it's going to come forward and hang out with us because the energy is meant to shift. It's meant to inform the now in some way. So that your conscious awareness can shift, your perception can shift on what you're capable of actualizing right now, who you are, the richness of you, right? Tasting more of yourself. But at the end of the day, when we go searching for this stuff and when we say, I cannot stand it when people say, oh, well, I had a past life where I was burned at the stake, or this happened or that happened. And so therefore I cannot, this is why I can't do that. And it's like, you can do whatever the fuck you want. And by the way, you're going to heal that shit when you stop making it an excuse and decide and move forward, right? Like it automatically gets healed. Like there's nothing you can't do. Does it help to have a context? Like when we understand our ancestry, yes, it can be helpful to have a context, but that's just so that we can, again, feel into those edges of ourselves and feel more of the multidimensional layers of who we are, right? So I love that you brought that forward because it is, I like that you also coupled that with the fact that time is a tool, that it's a powerful tool that we are also able to use, that as much as it doesn't exist and is not, it very much is as well. And so we also get to use it as a tool, like you said, to structure your day so that you create space for presence, so that you create space for sensation and make choice, you know. And I think that that's a piece too, is this idea of choice with time. And it's like, okay, well, do I choose this now? Do I choose this later? Well, if it's come into your consciousness to decide whether to choose, you've already chosen, right? That energy is already moving in your fields. The actualization of that in terms of how and when it comes into 3D form is not up to you because spirit doesn't work on your timeline, right? But the decision is already made, right? The decision is already made. So it's like if I choose in the now, the decision is, it's done. If I've chosen 25 years ago, the decision is done, right? And the energy has already been in motion. And so I would love if you guys have thoughts on that, but what this brings forward for me is this urgency piece that you spoke so brilliantly about before we started, Nino. So if there's something that comes forward around what I just said, go for it. But otherwise, I would love it if you could chime in on that piece.
Yeah, I was thinking about how, how you said, if we're choosing now, the energy has already been in motion, and this is where we get to creation is finished. It is already done, and this is where we are the vehicle of time, right? It's already done. It's already done. Like just feel into that part. It's already done. The energy has already been in movement, and my conscious decision is just confirmation that it is already done. A lot of times we want to think that the conscious decision comes first. My cat agrees. We think the conscious decision comes first, but our energetic decision comes first. The frequency is what informs our consciousness. The sensation informs our consciousness. So I just wanted to put that out there. And it ties it very well into this urgency is the vibration of attunement, feeling uncomfortable. What I was thinking about when I wrote that was the nervous system. The nervous system feeling, and I explained this in the last episode, that chaotic vibration of trying to hold what is when the mind hasn't come into resonance with it or into alignment and attunement with it. And that's all that is. Urgency feels like I don't have it yet. I need this to happen yesterday. Well, honeys, it already did. When we really think about it, because the energy goes into motion before the conscious thought of confirmation, that nervous system is just catching up. So really we are catching up to time, not time. Like we don't have to run towards time because time is already like a time and place that we're gonna get there anyway. I don't have to run towards it. I don't have to rush towards it. I can walk and still arrive on time. I can slow down my steps and still be on time. What are your thoughts?
That's just reminding me that everything's energy and that we are dense, and that we are, like you said, that our creation is done, and we simply have to allow ourselves to attune to it, to receive it, because we've made everything already. We made it before we got here. We're just dense as fuck. So we're so we're getting there. I like that a lot, you know.
It makes me think of that Rumi quote, we're all just walking each other home, right? It's like, who gives a shit, right? Like, who cares what you're doing and when you're doing it and how you're doing it and what role or container you put yourself in and when that role comes into play. Like, my goodness, like we're all going to the same place. And we're all going to end up like, we're all going to go back to the universe. We're all going to be back with source, right? And we're going to get wherever our soul desires us to get. We're going to get there. And we're all here just reflecting to each other and being in space as we float through these human experiences, right? And it feels like none of it matters. And yet we get to none of it matters by being fully present with the moment in which we currently are, right? Because otherwise we're getting lost in the sauce of what's supposed to matter so that I can get to there, or what has mattered. And that's why it's so complicated. It's such complexity in thought, like Jenna was saying. When really, when I talked about dissociation earlier, right? It's actually that space of not dissociation where we're disconnected from reality, but higher consciousness states are really about being in this different perceptual space at the same time that we are grounded in this reality, right? And so it's bringing a marriage to both of those concepts of like, I am beyond the mind. Like, even when I had a concussion, when my daughter had a concussion, I was like, dude, everybody should sign up for at least one concussion in this lifetime. Like, I literally think we should just smack everybody on the head at least once, because the thing is you get that sensation of like being beyond the mind at the same time that you're grounded in reality. Like, and granted, it's not the same thing. Okay, please don't hit your head on a wall right now or a tree branch like I did. But you get that sensation in the body and that bodily memory that comes forward around what it feels like to be in a different perceptual state at the same time that you're present and in sensation. And I think that this is why people use mind altering substances like psychedelics to get to a higher consciousness state, because they don't know that sensation within their bodies of what it feels like to be in a higher consciousness state at the same time that you are grounded in reality. Right. And the problem is that you're not really grounded in reality when you're on substances like that, but it starts to bring that sensation online. And there's a lot of people in this world whose nervous systems, like Nina was talking about earlier, like whose nervous systems, because of trauma or whatever, just don't feel safe enough to open to this spacious universal space and energy. And that's understandable, which is why we have coaches and therapists that and loved ones who are educated in this stuff that can hold us as we go through that process. So I see you if you're one of those people, and know that that time can be very, very distorted if we've had any kind of experiences of trauma, because our nervous systems can literally feel like we are still trapped in that frozen space in time when something has occurred, right? And we can see this through scientific research around trauma itself, being able to rewire that. And we can do the same thing with our perception of time. We can do because it's the same process. It's the same process. So, Nino, did you have another thought that was coming up as I was speaking before we finish up?
No, I don't want to make this about manifestation, so I won't add that. But I did want to add one piece. None of this is about being delusional, like you were referring to, Laura. None of it is about being delusional that you don't have to abide by societal time anymore. Please, let's keep our jobs. If you have a 9 to 5, please let's keep the constructs of time that we live by. But it is that duality of knowing that, yes, I am choosing to abide by the construct of time that we have created as a collective in this life. And I get to know that I am not here only. I am in the spiritual realm at the same time that I'm in this 3D realm. I am beyond the body and beyond the construct of time, simultaneously that I am here, abiding by it and reveling in the time that we have constructed for ourselves, even because I think we can treat time as this thing that we are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we made that for ourselves. But we could also treat it as what it was intended to be, that structure, that method and tool for us to move through this lifetime in a way that feels supportive. Um, and so I wanted to also say that in reference to the urgency, we are allowed to let our bodies and our minds attune in a way that it feels like a surrender and a sigh and a softening in this present moment. It doesn't have to be hard. We don't have to force ourselves to softening into it. But when we start to apply presence, intentional presence, the urgency of time can drop.
And I think everybody's felt that, like that moment when time stops. Whether it's your child being born, or you're on, the top of a mountain looking at a landscape, and it's just like time stops. Or you're with that person and you're lost in their eyes, time stops, right? Like we all know that feeling and that sensation. And that is the purity of presence. Plug for our previous episode on presence that you can check out in our Soul Talk playlist. But yeah, I really appreciate you bringing forward this concept of urgency, this concept of anchoring it into the human and deeply revering time as it is, at the same time that we are truly just shifting out of this thought-based identification that Jenna was talking about, of how I identify. I can identify and know that I am a spiritual being, and I can be fully present here, and working within what we've created on this planet, because there's purpose in that as well. So if there's not anything else to share, I think we are complete for today. And we will see you for our next episode, episode 6. Thank you for being here. And please share any questions or reflections in the show notes or the comments. And we'll see you very soon. Bye for now.